Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Distil-Nation Podcast. My name is Tom, and I'm joined as always by my friend Cameron. Hello.
Always a pleasure.
As it is always a pleasure. It's great, especially when we get to drink and talk about great New Zealand spirits. Very excited today that you've brought up another very in-depth and well-researched episode.
This could be a longer one.
Okay, yeah.
You know, just be prepared for that. There's a couple of things. Out of the history part 2, there were some tangents that were coming off, and then also there was a recent article published on One News about licensing trusts.
Yes, I did see that, yeah.
There was a combination of the two of those that kind of prompted this spin-off into licensing laws.
Which don't get too excited, everybody.
Yeah, everybody, stay with us.
Yeah.
Stay with us.
Promise.
Because yes, it was really interesting reading the comments underneath the Facebook post by One News of all of these people saying like, "Why are you writing this article? It's not news. We've never been able to buy wine or beer in a supermarket in Invercargill."
Yeah.
Now, Invercargill is not the only one. It's the biggest one, not the only one. But it was a combination of that. I used to work at a place. I had some colleagues based in America, and telling them that, one, not only do we have Easter holidays, they don't get days off for Easter over there, we do, but also telling them that the advertisement and sale of alcohol is banned on Good Friday and on Easter Sunday. And they are looking at me like we're some backward hick town going, what? And I'm like, okay, on Good Friday, like basically nothing's open, and same for Easter Sunday, but for the few places that are open, you can't buy beer unless you're doing this. And he's like, what do you mean?
It is those 4 days a year. It's Good Friday, Easter Sunday, ANZAC Day, and Christmas Day.
Morning of ANZAC Day and Christmas Day. So there was all of this kind of, for the Americans in particular, who were looking at us going like, we've got weird liquor laws. And I'm like, mate, look in a mirror. But it kind of, all of these things prompted me to have a look and go, how did we end up here?
Yeah, fantastic. I think it's going to be interesting to hear it.
Strap in, I'm getting a bit hot.
Oh dear.
My heart's going again.
No.
Feeling historical. Let's go. So yeah, people think prohibition. They think America. I don't think people in New Zealand fully appreciate how close New Zealand came to being a dry country.
Yeah.
Completely dry, like in America. So let's just start off. So first off, let's get our definitions in place. Temperance and prohibition. People will often use temperance and prohibition in conjunction, interchangeably, but they are different. So just for clarification here, temperance advocates for moderation and sometimes in its most extreme form, abstinence from drinking alcohol. And so when we will get there, when we're talking about some of these social reformers and they're talking about temperance, they were really concerned with the, let's face it, men who were going off, doing work, drinking the pay packet before coming home. And they were saying, okay, this is not good. And no, that's absolutely not a good thing.
Yeah.
So that is temperance. Prohibition, on the other hand, is looking at the manufacture, transportation, sale. So that's the production side versus consumption, and temperance is looking at consumption versus production. So two sides of the same coin, they do mean different things.
That's good to know. Yeah, perfect.
All right. So this is also, as opposed to the last couple of history episodes where we've started at the back and we've worked up to today, right now we're going to start with today and we're going to work our way backwards.
It's going to be one of those confusing sitcom episodes where you start in the future and then go back in time.
As Christopher Nolan.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be a Christopher Nolan episode where we're starting in the future and then we work our way backwards to see how we got to here.
All right.
So bear with me, that's what we're doing.
Got it.
The Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012 says no alcohol can be sold on Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Christmas Day, or before 1 p.m. on ANZAC Day. There are, however, some weird legal loopholes which create grey areas. For example, if you're a guest and you're staying in a hotel, now the restaurant of that hotel will be open because they can't reasonably expect you to have food to prepare in your own home. You're a guest in a hotel. So you can go to the hotel. You can't go to the bar. Bar's closed. You can go to the restaurant. Can you order a glass of wine at the restaurant? Maybe if you are ordering, and I'm quoting here, a substantial meal.
Right. Yes.
So
I have read that. Yeah.
I think we can all agree that, and I mean, look, I love going to the pub and ordering a bowl of chips. Having a drink, bowl of chips, great afternoon.
Yep.
I think we can all agree that a bowl of chips does not constitute a substantial meal. That's a snack.
Yeah.
But what does?
Right.
If you're going in and getting some poutine or some loaded fries, is that a substantial? I've thrown that reference in for you, my friend.
Love it. Yeah. See, I would argue it is because it's a poutine would be for sure. But then if you call it down here loaded fries, like I don't know if they would, But
it's got some cheese, some bacon, some gravy.
Depends on the size,
top.
maybe of the portion. Then maybe that's the next.
But that's if somebody was coming in to check and they look at that. What does constitute, and I'm using air quotes here, a substantial meal?
Yeah.
So this is that you can't, your liquor stores are closed, your supermarkets are closed, even the ones that are open can't buy alcohol on those days, apart from, as I say, these weird grey areas where the restaurants of some hotels will be open but can only serve you drinks if you are ordering and I mean, if you go in, and you say, all right, I'll have the Sunday roast meal. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And you get that meal. Can you have 6 pints over the course of that meal?
Yeah.
Again, these are kind of the grey areas which have prompted me and others, presumably, to ask, how did we get here?
Yeah.
How is it that we have, because we take it for granted that, this is just how things are done. It's not how things are done in the rest of the world.
No.
Not at all.
No.
So, the last referendum on New Zealand's liquor laws was in 1989, and they were held every election cycle from 1949 until 1987. And they would hold the referendum at the same time they were holding the election to say, shall we change our liquor laws? Shall we, what shall we do? You're the people, you decide. And finally in 1989, and if we have a listen to the history part 2, where you have a bit more of an insight into the decision making behind that Labour government of the late 1980s and why they were making those decisions.
Yep.
There you go. Why so many referendum, Tom?
That's a lot of referendums.
It's a lot.
I don't know.
To keep kicking the can down the road. It's not going to surprise you, I promise.
Yeah.
By kicking the can down the road and holding so many referenda, it meant that government was able to stall making any... Because, as we're going to get into, the calls for prohibition were quite strong. And as we will get into, New Zealand very nearly became a completely dry country. By throwing it back on the people and saying we've got to hit such a majority or a threshold, and sometimes that changed, but hitting that, throwing it back onto the people, government avoids making an unpopular decision, puts the onus back on the electorate to decide, and they still get to collect all of the duties and customs.
It's fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, it's
if you're in government, it makes sense.
And if you're in government, it makes complete sense. We will collect keeping all of the money and then just kick the can down the road for the next government and avoid making an unpopular decision. Bang. I think nothing has changed in the history of government anywhere. So that's that. Taking another step back, nationwide liquor laws, like you have to be 18 in order to purchase liquor, those laws are set at a national level. However, deciding who can sell liquor, that's decided at a local level.
Something that's been discussed lately in Christchurch, I've seen as well, via the... you want to help me out? The policy, the local something policy, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Local licensing. So licensing bodies. So we've got licensing trusts, licensing bodies. But yeah, if you want to open up a liquor store like this lovely one that you see around us, like Juniper Collective, you've got to have a liquor license, but that's issued by local councils as opposed to by the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the 1960s, taking a step back, like sale of alcohol was very much like a states' rights issue if we're to compare ourselves to the United States for a second. So there were a series of reform bills going through Parliament, public attitudes around temperance and prohibition, gain a whole lot of momentum, gain some support, they're waxing and waning. So it was very, like, the can again got kicked down to a local issue, like, oh, okay, well, if you want temperance, we're not going to make a decision for the country, but we will give the power to you, local authorities, to make the decision on whether or not you want to have alcohol in your district or in your region. So we've got the Alcoholic Liquors Sale Control Act of 1893. Gave electors the vote on a question of whether or not the number of liquor licences in their districts should be continued or reduced, or whether there's no new ones. So again, we come back to this 1894 with those prohibition referenda that was held in conjunction with general elections. And those results only impacted the local area. Okay. They didn't have an impact over the country as a whole. Where we go? Here we go. Referendums 1894, 1902, 1905, 1908. The majority of votes nationally were just let's issue no new liquor licenses. But only electorates with a majority of license for no vote went completely dry. So we've got, what have we got? The first poll, 1894. The high water mark was in 1908, where a total of 12 districts out of 76 nationally voted to go dry. We're talking Masterton, Oamaru, Invercargill, parts of Auckland, like West Auckland, parts of Wellington, parts of Otago and Southland. And they remained completely dry from 1909 right into the 1960s.
Wow, okay. That's a long time.
It's a long time, which kind of ties back into some of our other history podcasts where we've talked about the liquor running, because Christchurch City was not dry, Invercargill was, and so there were people that were smuggling booze in between different parts of New Zealand because...
Pretty hard to control it, yeah. It's just one big land.
So we're about to head down south. We're going to take a tour down south to talk about licensing trusts. So maybe, Tom, you can introduce us to Eliza's Claim.
Yeah, so we've brought out Eliza's Claim Dry Gin. This is infused with citrus and manuka honey from Kaimai Brewing and Distilling. They're up in Waikino. I don't exactly know where that is. Do you?
Waikino.
Yeah.
It's actually not down south at all.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I thought it was up north.
But we were talking about gold.
But we're talking about gold, so this sort of comes into that. And it's a great name. They have a couple different gins in this sort of Eliza's Claim lineup. So we thought we'd pull this out. And this one pulls in at 47%.
Ooh.
So that's pretty hefty.
I think it's fair to say, one, where we used to record at your distillery, you had a great selection of open bottles, mainly from your personal collection from New Zealand distilleries. the open bottles of New Zealand whiskey have yet to make their way over to here.
Yep.
And in this beautiful Juniper collective, there are far more open gin bottles than there are whiskey bottles at this current point in time.
At the moment, yep. That'll change, I'm sure. But that has got a beautiful nose to it. It's very light and sweet. Definitely like a bit of citrus, but not like it's more of like a lime citrus to me. And
yet I'd stop, because they've called it a dry gin, and I'm going to agree with them. There is a citrus hit, but I would stop short of calling this like a citrus flavoured gin.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a dry gin, a very London dry sort of style.
Is that ginger?
Yeah, ginger. Yeah.
I was just...
That's it.
Ginger nuts.
Yeah, totally.
Ginger nuts with a bit of, like...
A touch of, like, honey sweetness to it.
Touch of honey and... lemon curd, if you've ever made lemon curd.
The taste, sweet. There's your citrus, there's your honey, there's your little bit of, ginger, like ginger nut, it's everything on the nose, just dialed up a little bit.
Yes, no surprises, but everything pulls through.
At 47%, that doesn't drink like 40, that drinks a lot.
No.
It's easier than that, eh?
That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And I think if you were to, I think this is one of these gins that I would skip the tonic, and I would put in a healthy pour of ginger beer or something like that.
That'd be great for that.
And I think you would be away laughing. That's dangerous.
So let's head down south, Gold Country.
We need to take a step to the side from our regularly scheduled programming, just to recognise that liquor laws in New Zealand are still different based on where you live.
Yeah.
If you go into a supermarket in West Auckland, if you go into a supermarket in Invercargill, and you are looking to buy some beer or some wine with your weekly grocery shop, you can't.
Right. And is it only in those two places? Are they the only two trusts?
No. They're two of the main ones.
Okay.
Invercargill, West Auckland are governed by licensing trusts.
Yeah.
They're two of the big ones. Invercargill Licensing Trust is the biggest, but there are still parts. And so these licensing trusts are a hangover of the referendum that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So this is, again, part of my thought process into working backwards. It's like, well, why do we have these licensing trusts? It's because of these referenda that were being held throughout the early 1900s.
Over 100 years ago, yeah.
Basically. 25th of September 1943, Invercargill held the vote to restore the sale of alcohol. Tom, what's happening in 1943?
World War II.
Indeed it is. So the votes to restore the sale of alcohol only get over the 60% threshold thanks to our serving men and women in the armed forces. So finally, all of these overseas votes from the armed forces came in. People at home say, we demand a recount. And the New Zealand military had to go, sorry, the place where we were holding the voting papers got hit by a bomb. So we don't have them anymore.
Oh, come on.
We're at war, people.
Yeah.
And I just think it's the massive logistical feat of getting people on the front lines to vote about whether or not they still want to be able to buy booze when they get home.
Yeah.
That's something. So yeah, people at home demanded a recount. The New Zealand military were like, we'd love to. We'd love to be able to send these papers home. Unfortunately, they have been destroyed, not by our choosing, so we can't.
Wow.
So what this shows is that at home, anyway, there was an appetite for prohibition.
Yeah.
And lots of practical concerns about, some of us want prohibition, some of us do want alcohol. How do we reconcile these, and how do we start to go about introducing the sale of alcohol into areas that had been dry for 60, 70 years? So there was the Invercargill Licensing Trust Act passed by Parliament in April of 1944, and it created a body corporate to balance community interests and well-being with sale of distribution and alcohol.
Yep.
Again, this is very similar to parts of the United States.
If I may, excuse me. There's we have something similar in Canada too. I'd say it is
where the state controls. State owns the liquor stores.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So where I'm from in Ontario, the province of Ontario, it is controlled by the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. We call it the LCBO, and all liquor sales go through this board. And its job, it's run by the government, and its job is also to redistribute that money as well to the community and balance these sort of things. So, this is a very North American sentiment, isn't it?
And indeed it is. And there's a whole lot of evidence that over time there were people involved in the temperance movement and in prohibition in North America. They were coming over to New Zealand and they were giving lectures and holding court, and people here were learning from them what worked and what didn't. So it doesn't surprise me at all to hear, because everything you've described is basically the role of the ILT, the Invercargill Licensing Trust, and for licensing trusts.
Yep.
So if you go to Invercargill, you want to have a cheeky drink, you've got to go to one of the 23 restaurants, bars or liquor stores owned by the ILT.
Right. And are they still, I actually don't know, are they still like Liquorlands and Bottle-O's and Super Liquors?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're, you know, the same brands that you would recognise from throughout the country, but owned by the ILT, which means that the profits and the proceeds go back here. So again, people would say, what's the upside of this kind of monopoly? So their mandate is redistributing the profits from alcohol sales back into the community. For the 2022-2023 financial year, that was $8 million.
Wow.
Back into Invercargill and Southland.
That's great.
So if you...
Does seem like a good thing, doesn't it, when you put it that way?
I mean... there was, it's not running anymore, but there was the Southern Institute of Technology, which was a polytech, and they were advertising. They were the only place in the country that you come to Invercargill and study at the Southern Institute of Polytech fees free. You won't have a student loan at the end of it.
Wow.
Why not? Because the licensing trust will pay for your fees.
How cool.
And again, for the sports teams, people looking for donations for health reasons, the City of Invercargill Pipe Band, there are lots of community organisations that massively benefit from, so sure, it means that you can't buy liquor in your supermarket, and when you go to your liquor store, you are definitely going to be paying a higher price for the same goods than what you would elsewhere in the country. Upside, there's jerseys being paid for sports teams, and if you need to travel to get to a tournament with your club, you can go ahead and you can do that.
Totally. This sounds very similar to what I grew up with, but like I say, the stores up my way in Ontario, Canada, they were actually branded LCBO, Liquor Control Board of Ontario, so you had to go to their store. You couldn't go to like a private store, and only recently have they actually started introducing sales into grocery stores and stuff. Growing up, you could never find beer or anything in a grocery store up our way. You had to go to the beer store, which was owned by the LCBO for your beer, or the LCBO for all your wine and spirits and such. So.
See, versus on my trips to London, or when I was in California and going into in America, going into a petrol station and seeing beer by the box being sold at a petrol station, and me thinking, hang on. Or going into any supermarket in London, any supermarket that we went to in the state of California, and beer, milk, eggs, chips, bourbon, and there's your whiskey aisle right there, and just very, very different.
Very different, eh? Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's jump back into our time machine, and New Zealand very nearly ended up completely dry twice. So 1911 was the first nationwide referenda. So all of those other ones that we were talking about, they were for a local level. 1911, this was the first one for the country. And the choices were continuance, keep things the way that they are, or prohibition, outlaw alcohol production. And the government said they needed a clear majority of 60% if they were going to change the law. Prohibition, do you want to have a guess at the percentage-wise? What did they get to?
Oh, it's got to be 50-something%, hey?
56.
Wow.
They got 56% of the vote.
Wow.
So very, very nearly.
Somebody in government had done their polling beforehand to realize that they had to push it up to 60 to make sure.
And this is it. So that was 1911, and 1919, April of 1919, the government said, okay, look, you got 56%. We're going to reduce it to a 50% majority. If more than half of the country votes for prohibition, we'll bring it in. And they came in with 48%.
Wow. You got to imagine, though, the reduction there has got to be World War I. I mean, it's got to be returning servicemen who returned, the few that did return.
Indeed.
But those are two very key dates with a huge event in the middle of them, Like that's...
Oh, yeah. From 1911 to 1919, the population loss significant, especially for a small country like New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference, 10,362 votes.
Wow.
And in fact, most people at home thought that the prohibition vote had indeed succeeded until the returning votes from the ANZACs were brought home from overseas.
Yeah.
And that tipped it the other way.
So
which is the fun fact, 1919.
So I was going to say, we've got a brand called 1919 Distilling in New Zealand, which Soren runs, and he's named it that because that was the year we almost had prohibition in New Zealand.
But to go from, all right, guys, you got to get 60% and they get 56. And I think this is another case of the government going, hey, look, we're going to avoid making what could be perceived as a very unpopular decision for at least half of the country.
Yeah.
But they go, hey guys, we're going to move the goalposts. We're going to bring it down to 50%. If you guys can get 51% of the vote, which, hey, you got 56 last time.
Yeah.
We can bring it down, and then we'll give you guys prohibition. The difference of 10,000 votes.
There you go. Gosh. And so did they vote again? Was that it?
No, so those two, that was the last nationwide. So everything on from there got kicked down from a national to a regional level.
Right. Everyone kind of gave up on it. Eh?
Everybody, yeah. So we're going to have another weird sidebar again.
Okay.
Because there's all these interesting pockets when you start looking at how liquor is sold in New Zealand. There's just some really interesting sidetracks that don't reach the threshold to have a whole episode about them, but, fascinating because they only occurred in New Zealand.
Okay, all right.
So, as a compromise, so here's the compromise. They're like, okay, these two nationwide referenda didn't pass, despite there being a very strong, very organised prohibition movement in New Zealand. So what we are going to do is we are going to reduce the pub closing time. Pubs used to close at 10 o'clock. They're now going to close at 6.
I've heard about this, yeah.
And we think that, this is the government and their infinite wisdom, if people can only buy beer in a pub until 6 o'clock, that's going to reduce the amount of alcohol being sold.
I have to imagine they were wrong.
This is one of the worst legacies for New Zealand's drinking culture, that for the people who decry, and look, I went to Otago University and I studied at Otago University, and people denounce the drinking culture in Otago, and I'm like, yeah, but it all stems back to this law from 1917
Yeah.
that we're still feeling the effects of today. Because rather than people knocking off work, going to the pub, having a pint, going, 6 o'clock, I should really get on home now. Instead, people are like, right, pub closes at 6. How much piss can I sink in the hour between knocking off at 5 and the pub closing at 6?
Yeah, that's the problem, eh? Like you're thinking, I want to drink tonight.
Yeah.
How am I going to make this last all night long? And you've only got till 6 o'clock.
And you've only got until 6 o'clock, and so the resulting negative drinking habits. Who could have possibly foreseen that telling people that they can only, that pubs are going to shut at 6 o'clock? Who could have foreseen? This is dumb. So dumb. It fueled the cries for greater liquor control. So again, that was 1917. Mm-hmm. All of these other referendum that we're having, people are talking about negative drinking habits. It stems back to people being told that, okay, well, you can't buy a beer after 6 o'clock. So if you are wanting to drink, basically, you've got until 6. Better make it count.
Oh, yeah, it's a problem. Yep.
So 67 alcohol referendum, 64% of voters called for closing times to be extended to 10 p.m, bringing the official 6 o'clock swill to an end. Now 67, that's only going back to like my parents' generation.
Exactly.
And my mum talked about her dad, who had come over from London, who, at lunch, like, you're living in England, and he was from London, but like having a pint with sandwich at lunch is fairly commonplace because people would have a pint, and just the attitudes were so much more relaxed. And then he comes over here and sees how people are drinking, and he's horrified. But what happens, and again, why when I was at university, and I shudder to think because I know how long it was since I was at university, and it's longer than I would care to admit, but they're talking about, these students have got negative drinking habits. It's only because you only have to go back at most 1, maybe 2 generations where you could only drink until 6. Then the government says, all right, fine, you can drink until 10. Do you think, Tom, that these people who had been conditioned from 1917 until 1967, you've got to cram as much drinking as possible into that 1 hour, and then, all right, the pub will stay open until 10. Do you think that they all, as one, unanimously said, hey, maybe we should cut back on the drink and just we don't have to cram as much as we possibly can into an hour. We can just, have a pint, sit on it and enjoy it. Do you think that they all changed their drinking behaviours and attitudes like that?
I imagine not.
Yeah. Nah. They would
just wait till...
Well, that's just it. They would do what they would normally do, at which point they would be chucked out onto the street, and then realise that they weren't being chucked out onto the street.
Yeah.
And those hardwired patterns and behaviours... what happens when you're used to drinking as many pints as you can in 1 hour, and then all of a sudden you've got 4?
It's
dumb.
Yeah, and you can definitely see once you build that picture where the drinking culture stems from today. I can see it now. Yeah.
Dumb.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back. We've had those referendum 1911, 1919. We're going to step back again. Who is pushing for prohibition? Mm-hmm. And it will come as no surprise that it was pretty much every church in New Zealand was united on the issue of temperance.
Yep.
But key to point out that it wasn't a religious issue. No. That there was a wide background. Temperance was also very closely tied to women's suffrage. Kate Shepherd, who was working for the right of women to get the vote, was also a very keen
temperance person.
Yeah, temperator. She part of the temperance movement.
Yep.
And it comes back again to, even before we get that 6 o'clock swill, it comes back to men drinking their pay packets and not being enough, and women like Kate Shepherd thought, well, if women can vote, then what stems from that? Well, women will have more of a right to work. They'll have more of a say in the economy, and let's try and wrest some of that control, providing for the family, back, so that it's not just man gets handed the money and manages to drink the pay packet in between finishing work and coming home.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Absolutely. Unsurprisingly, brewers were very much in favour of keeping their business, and many politicians also were opposed to temperance because duties and excise, that's how they're getting money for other things. They want to keep their tax revenue. Prohibitionists argued that if we outlawed booze, if nobody can go and drink, just think of what a productive society we would be. And therefore, because all of our businesses would be more efficient, you will then make up the shortfall in tax revenue that way.
I highly doubt that would ever happen. Oh, jeez.
But I've read, there's a couple of really interesting accounts between prohibitionists and temperance movements organising rallies and protests, and then people spilling out of the pub going, "You're not taking my booze from me," and they start a fight and a riot breaks out. And at least one of these accounts, it's like the prohibitionists won on the account of they were all sober and could fight better. So, you had trade unions who were trying to protect their workers, and churches and rationalist societies who, they're agnostic, but they can see the value of having a dry society. They're all facing off against each other. And really
I kind of picture the Anchorman 2 scene where all the different news teams come up and they just start brawling. That's what I picture.
You're like, okay, well we're the Presbyterians and we're the Anglicans and we're the Catholics and we're the agnostics, and we don't like your stance on God, but God, we're with you when it comes to alcohol, and we're the trade unions and we're the breweries and we're the distilleries and we're the farmers that grow the grain. I think that's a really good picture. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Let's take a step back again.
All right.
So we're coming back to 1864 and 1860s.
Yeah.
So that was, So 1860s. You remember, Tom, what's happening in Otago in particular in the 1860s?
The gold rush. Yeah.
Indeed, it is. Massive, as we have talked about, massive influx of people, and Dunedin is the biggest city in all of New Zealand. So there's a massive influx of people following the gold rush, and what follows gold miners? Booze.
Yep.
So Dunedin had an alcohol ordinance, and they were the first place in New Zealand to actually have a local ordinance to decide who could sell liquor and who couldn't. They needed it because massive influx of people, all of a sudden the demand is there, and it allowed local registered voters the power to grant or refuse licenses to sell liquor. So this, again, it's a central government response to local issues. And again, if we think of the amount of time it would take for communication to go between Otago and, I should really know, when did Wellington become capital of New Zealand?
I wouldn't actually
But
know that.
either way, it's going up into the North Island, so there's, the communication time is a whole lot slower, and this was a case of central government saying, okay, you guys make a decision about what's best for you. And, do we want anybody being able to sell moonshine? No. We'll put it to the voters and, local registered voters. Central government doesn't have a lot of power, but after Dunedin gets theirs, Auckland, Taranaki, Nelson, they soon get theirs. Now, the gold mine is part of it, but why did we need these ordinances? We step back from 1964 into the 1850s. And Maori chiefs and missionaries are complaining to, again, this is 1850s, we don't have a very powerful, organised central government. It was very much done on a local level based on, who happened to be controlling a province at the time. They were complaining, Maori chiefs and missionaries were complaining that unscrupulous settlers were using booze to swindle Maori out of their land.
Okay.
And that's a tale as old as colonialism,
It is,
where
yeah.
you go, you get the natives drunk, you show them a good time, make them sign a piece of paper that they don't really understand, and then in the morning tell them, tough luck, my land is yours now.
Yeah.
There was clearly a call for greater control, because that's not okay.
No.
There's no part of that that's okay at all. And prior to that of the 1850s, where, the people are, more Europeans are coming over, trying to get land before they're getting to this. Prior to this, before the calls for greater restrictions on the sale of alcohol for social reasons, or to protect tangata whenua here, the 1842 alcohol ordinance specifically restricted trade on Sundays, Good Friday, and Christmas Day, so there would be no competition with the church about where people were going to be spending their time.
All right. Yeah. So it's going back that far.
It's gone back that far. Now, this is a great opportunity to introduce our next one, the Black Collar Gin.
Yeah, so Black Collar, we've talked about them before when we talked about their rum, but they're up in the Bay of Islands. This is a 42% gin. And I think I have had this one before. It's been a while, but I think I have had this.
I've had a number of versions of their rum, spiced and a pineapple. I don't think I've had their gin before.
It is a London dry style, Black Collar, they're always making nice stuff up their way. And for sure on the nose, it's got a bit of a pepper for me, like a black pepper note.
Oh yeah, it's very as opposed to one that's absolutely packed with botanicals. This is quite
light,
quite subdued, very juniper forward.
Yep, there's a note in there I'm trying to pick apart, but I can't exactly picture what it is.
Well, that's lovely. That's classic. There's no real surprises there. I think if you're a classic gin lover and you grab a bottle of that, you're going to be very happy.
Absolutely, yeah. Nice little warming spice to it of some description. Like I say, I think it's a bit of black pepper, but something else as well. Yeah. I could quite see that going very nicely in a nice gin and tonic. I think that would do very well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it's almost like a earthy spice, I really can't.
It's not a it's not a fruit or a citrus or anything like that. No.
Doesn't say anything on there, does it? No. Juniper forward, hints of floral and spice. Really? That's exactly what we've said. Okay. Oh well,
good to know.
We'll take that.
Okay, so we've got to jump back from the 1850s with the reprehensible practices of some settlers. regular European settlers are coming over more regularly and more steadily from the early 1800s. And again, those settlers are bringing booze. They're bringing spirits from the UK, predominantly whiskey and rum. And they're brewing beer here as a way of purifying the water and making sure that the water is safe to drink. So beer is being brewed here, but spirits, and again, you go back to those earliest days, and ship manifests are very clearly stating that they're, hey, watch out for this one. It's got some great whiskey from Campbelltown. Yep. Keep an eye out. Who's coming to New Zealand? Who's coming to New Zealand at this time? We've got missionaries and pious religious minorities who are seeking freedom, and they're often pitted against the quote-unquote lawless sealers, whalers, escaped Australian convicts, sailors from around the world who are coming in for trade and again for whaling. And at this point, there's no established rule of law to cover these people. Now, I don't know about you, Tom, but anybody who has gone on an OE, myself included, you play up when you're in a different country because you're like, there's no constraints, people don't know me, so you tend to play up your own stereotypes.
Fair enough, yep, totally.
I know I did. Guilty as charged. And you only need to have a look at like the London Waitangi Day pub crawl, where you've got people who are doing haka in the streets who would never normally be doing a haka or anything along those kinds of lines. But you're like, I'm overseas, and your Kiwiisms, your New Zealandisms come out way more overseas than what they would at home.
Yeah.
So no one's more Kiwi than when they're overseas. And I mean, I can only speak for myself here, but I think goes for others as well, that when you go overseas and you're in a different environment and all of a sudden your stereotypes get played out on a larger scale.
Oh, well, bud, up our way, we take our sticks and, our poutine, and we got the Molsons, and it's a great time, eh? Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right, bud. Yeah. So, how about that? Yeah.
How about? Oh, dear. But so the pious end up becoming more pious, and the lawless end up becoming more lawless because they're like, okay, well, who's gonna do anything? Who's going to help? So the lawless become more depraved, and Russell, which is close to where black collar is made, Kororareka, becomes widely known as the hellhole of the Pacific.
It is, yeah. I've read the short history of New Zealand. I think it was Penguin Publishing or something like that, and it is known like that Northland. Wow, like the stories that like go on up there. Like it is a lawless pirate sort of place. Like this is stuff that I'd be reading about in the Caribbean or something. Like it's
because you've got this mix of the indigenous Maori who are living there. You've got the missionaries who also they're trying to recreate new land of God, and then all of these sealers, whalers, escaped convicts, and everybody else doing whatever, and it's all bubbling to a head right here. And so this drove missionaries and Maori chiefs to petition the New Zealand leaders, James Busby and William Hobson. Get your people in line. You've got to sort it out here, get a more established rule of law, and ultimately this is how we end up with the Treaty of Waitangi.
Right, okay.
There's a whole lot that can be said about the Treaty of Waitangi that I am not going to get into because I'm not a scholar. There's another debate around what was ceded and what was not, and I'm not getting into any of that.
This is the New Zealand Spirits Podcast.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, of course, when we're looking at all of those settlers in particular that are coming over to New Zealand at this time, the vast majority, apart from like one small settlement in Akaroa, which is French, but the vast majority are from the UK, which at this point had established laws around trading and sale of alcohol on Sundays, Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Mm-hmm. And it made sense because they were like, well, that's the established norm back here, and we're going to bring them over to New Zealand with us. So, all this to say, in 2024, we are dealing with the hangovers of liquor laws from the 1700s, where some of the most pious people from the United Kingdom were coming to New Zealand looking to start a new life, where some of the most depraved people in the world are looking to escape the rule of law, start a new society, and our society, New Zealand, is what happens when you get all of these people and put these groups together.
Right, okay.
Case in point, UK doesn't have alcohol trading laws anymore.
Oh.
No, they phased them out. They're
okay.
no, if you...
So you can buy it any day of the year,
with
sort of
the
thing.
exception of Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
there's no restriction around the sale of alcohol on any other days.
Okay. Is it a big deal? Like, is it a big deal if we can't buy it for Good Friday, where you can go buy it on Easter Saturday, but you can't buy it again on Easter Sunday? Is it a big deal for one day where you can't go buy?
I mean, when I was a much younger man, and you go out to the clubs on a Thursday night and it would hit midnight, Good Friday, and they're like, right, out. And usually, when you were much younger, like midnight's just when things are starting to wind up. They're like, all right, out. And then you would be back outside waiting for the club to open on like 12:01 on the Saturday, so that you could get in kind of like for the latter half of the Saturday night, and then again to repeat it on the Saturday night before Easter Sunday, where you can get in from 10, 11, and then the clock hits 12. Right, you're gone, you're out.
Yeah. It is it does seem a bit arbitrary if you're not religious, those dates. Like, it's just like
that would be one of the big arguments for people.
But at the same time, I kind of like the idea of saying, like, okay, if I can't handle not having alcohol for a day, maybe there's a problem with me. And I think it's a good way to check in, like, if obviously Christmas Day, if I'm going to the shop to buy alcohol, either I forgot it for the family gathering or there's something wrong with me, morning of ANZAC Day, I should be doing better things on my morning of ANZAC Day than going and buying alcohol, same with Easter Sunday and Good Friday. I understand Good Friday, it's a Friday, yeah, it's it's the day we all knock off, but you're kind of knocking off a day earlier anyway. So I don't know, like, to me it's not a big deal. Like, and I know I read the articles every year, and every year they ask, why do we have these laws?
Yep.
Should we get rid of them? I am a bit,
But
whatever.
I'll tell you something for free. None of those articles about why do we have these laws, none of them have gone all the way back to the 1700s to say we have these laws because we had strong puritanical people coming over and mixing with the worst of humanity and trying to make the best out of a bad situation. So let's just do this.
Yeah, no, this has been a really good in-depth view of it, and it does bring a very big picture, and it gives you the big picture. Usually you look at each of these views individually and you think, oh, why is it that way? But now you've brought it together.
Well, okay, why has it done that? Let's take a step back. Oh, why have they done this? Well, let's take a step back. And basically, and I think, look, if we are going to one of the dumbest New Zealand, the dumbest moves that a New Zealand government has ever made, reducing the sale of alcohol to 6 p.m.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
For 40-ish years, and then without any kind of phasing out or anything. And I bet I would put good money on the fact that they did not do any kind of public health messaging to say, hey, we are increasing the amount of time that you can buy a pint after work. Maybe just go easy. I would put good money on the fact that they didn't do that.
It wasn't a big thing, yeah.
And basically for all of the people who... And that's the thing, is that if you are on social media, and any time when recently Police Commissioner Andrew Costa was in the news and he was talking about tighter regulation on the sale of alcohol, people talk about the licensing trusts, anytime there is a very strong public sentiment saying, yeah, we do need tighter control. Why do supermarkets need to sell liquor? Yes, we do need to tighten up here. New Zealand absolutely has a very funny relationship with alcohol and sale and consumption, but we are still today dealing with the legacy and the impacts of these referenda and these laws and ultimately starting with the first settlers coming over here.
What a ripple.
What a ripple.
Thank you, Cameron. That's a huge amount of research you put into that. That's awesome. I hope this makes it into your book, which I think everyone should advocate. Cameron, start writing his book.
The new New Zealand whiskey book.
Yeah. I think you're onto something here. And so let this be the definitive message for anybody looking to write their yearly stuff article. Listen to Cameron.
Yeah. Why can't we buy booze on Good Friday? Because of the settlers.
Yep.
That's why.
Yep. Blame your ancestors.
Blame your ancestors from 300 years ago.
Yep.
There we have it.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think only to say we are going to have more exciting topics. We're going to bring in some more distillers to have a chat with. We're going to be taking on some more lighter, happier topics in future. And if you have a say about what you would like to hear, get in touch and let us know.
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch with us, Distil-Nation NZ on Facebook or Instagram, as well as on TikTok. We always forget about TikTok.
Indeed.
You've got distilnationnz@gmail.com. You can email us anytime. Please feel free. It can be just a happy hello. It doesn't need to be anything substantial. We just love hearing from people. As well as distilnation.nz is our website. And if you're listening to this on your podcasts, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. That pushes them to get this out to other people as well, and then we can continue growing it and get more spirits on and keep growing this awesome industry that we're all a part of. So cheers, everybody. Thank you, Cameron.
Indeed.
This has been really good. Cheers.